know me, my name is Wendy Mayhew, and I am the author of WISER, the Definitive Guide to Starting a Business After the Age of 50. And now, as I say all the time, I don't want to make this about COVID, but COVID helped me make the decision that I needed to do a virtual book tour. We know the COVID is affecting all of us in some way, shape, or form, but I think I'm a strong believer that, unfortunately, that with all the layoffs that are going to come, it's going to be people that are older. And they may have a very difficult time finding work. And so I want to be able to give them the opportunity of exploring entrepreneurship as an encore career. So, and on the people that the reach that this is going to, just so you know, the people that registered from it, like last time was from Dubai. This time somebody's registered from Calcutta. We got Africa. We've got the UK. We have California. We have Jon walking around. Okay, so California and Canada. So, and I don't know where else I might have missed, but anyways, I welcome you all and I thank you for joining me and being part of this. How we're going to do this is I am going to back away from the conversation. I may jump in every now and again, but I have a moderator. His name is Paul Tasner. And Paul is the perfect person to be moderating as he lost his job unexpectedly at the age of 64. And he started his business at the age of 66. So, and during that time, Paul he's done a TED Talk. It has over 2 million views and has been translated into 29 different languages. So to me, when he's talking about his experiences becoming an entrepreneur later in life, with that many views, now I must admit a lot of them are from me because I keep going back and watching it again and again, but there certainly is an interest in older entrepreneurship. So, so once I introduce Paul, he is then going to introduce Jon, Karen, and Jarrod, and he will be taking over and asking questions and whatnot. So if I do ask that there aren't any conversations going back and forth in the chat box, and unless you're just going to put a question in there that you want us to ask one of the panelists. And if you do have a question that you want to ask, please mention who you want who the question is for. All right, I think that's all my little introduction, shall we say. So I'm now going to, excuse me, I've already introduced Paul of what he's done, but Paul, I'd like you to now just tell us a little bit about what your company is all about.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I should also say, Wendy, thanks for your lovely introduction, but I always wonder why when you say I lost my job at 64 and started my company at 66, it always begs the question, well, what the hell was this guy doing for 2 years? So,
yeah, well, I was thinking about that the other day, but you can tell us what happened during that time.
I was doing a lot of thinking and you know, trying to earn a living as best I could. The company that I founded at that time that Wendy referred to is called Pulpworks, and we design and manufacture packaging for consumer products, but we use waste as our raw material. We use paper and agricultural waste, and so our packages are entirely compostable or hopefully recyclable as well. And we've met with growing success over the years since our founding, but it's been slow. Companies are reluctant to give up their plastic packaging. Most cases we're designed to replace plastic packaging, but it's been growing every year, and the world is coming around to a greener approach toward packaging, but it still has a long way to go. But I'm very confident and encouraged by what I've seen. So it's been really exciting. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So,
how many years has it been now, Paul?
9.
Not already. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So anyway, thank you for asking. And I thought I'd begin by just providing a brief bio for each of the speakers today, Jon and Karen and Jarrod. I'll begin with Jon. And Jon, I worked with a rather lengthy bio because you have an incredibly lengthy and excellent career. So apologies if I omitted anything that you wanted to highlight, but you can highlight it when you talk.
Shorten it, Paul, please.
But yes, you have an incredibly impressive career. Jon's career started in the corporate world, working in the US and across Europe. 15 years at ExxonMobil, Jon founded and grew a management consulting business, the Worldwide Center for Organizational Development, which had 30 people carrying out a range of strategy assignments for large companies across numerous categories. Following his time as a management consultant, Jon was the CEO of 2 startups. And since his successful exit from the second startup, Jon has been mentoring and investing in disruptive startup and early stage companies, especially in the area of technology deployment in the healthcare, and wellness space. Jon is LA chapter ambassador for Aging 2.0 and is the co-chair of the annual Aging into the Future conference in Los Angeles. Jon's a noted speaker, a prolific author, and a university lecturer. He's a native of England. He's lived in LA since 2004, and he and his wife Anne have 4 grown children. So that is Jon Warner. Next, Karen Wickre. Did I say it right, Karen?
You did. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen is the author of Networking for Introverts. Karen has been called the best connected Silicon Valley figure you've never heard of, and a powerful but unsung resource for the tech industry insiders seeking career advice. She's worked for 30 years in technology businesses as a writer, editor, and communications pro, including long stints at Google and Twitter. Her longtime avocation is to connect people, which is what led her to write a book detailing ways to build an authentic personal network, taking the work out of networking, your guide to making and keeping great connections. She's at KVOX on Twitter, and her website is Karen Wickre, that's Karen, WICKRE.com. And next up, Jarrod Goldsmith, networking at events. Jarrod Goldsmith is a Canadian small business community builder and is the embodiment of the small business spirit. He's one of Ottawa's best-known entrepreneurs and founded Sax Appeal, Canada's premier saxophone ensemble. ESAX, the Entrepreneurial Social Advantage Experience, Canada's largest entrepreneur networking community for small business, and he also hosts Ask the Fedora, a YouTube networking video series. Those are great names, actually. Really great names. Anyway, those are our speakers. They're fascinating people, and I'm really excited to begin the conversation with them. And having said that, maybe we'll just go back in the same order. We'll start with Jon. Jon, I've been handed a list of questions to ask you, but I have my own too. I mean, just so many things came up as I read your biography. But I'll stick to the script for the time being.
You don't have to, Paul. You don't have
No, that's fine.
I'm not going to stick to the script either.
I'm going to ask it in kind of a 3-part question, because I think it's pretty much on everyone's mind when they're getting into new territory, scary territory, and that is, when do you need someone to help you? How do you find that someone? And is there often a cost involved in finding that someone? I know that could be 3 different stories to tell, but if you could sort of combine those and give us your thoughts, please.
Of course. So, and I'm sure Karen's going to have a lot more to say on this than I will, but through the lens that I see the world, which is the lens of entrepreneurship, individuals need mentoring a lot, and they need it early. And I think the way mentoring works is it goes in two directions. So I think you get what you give, and you give what you get. So I think it's a two-way street, and I think it's a life skill to develop in general. And I think when we hit crisis situations, and the one we're in at the moment with COVID in particular, where our world changes, and you can argue we've been driven all the way from fairly high up on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you use that rubric, to the bottom of that pyramid, where we're worried about, you know, whether we've got enough money in the bank to survive, and our job will be sustained, etc. We need to reach out and help other people, and in turn they help us. So I think it's a two-way street. We always need that. We want to be nurturing those relationships, and the more we're helping other people, the more they will help us back in return. So that's how I see it, and that's how it works best in the entrepreneurship world in general.
Thank you. Thank you. Karen, well, one of the questions I have here, which I'm sure you could spend a day talking about, is why did you write the book, Taking the Work Out of Networking? And I'm sure that can prompt you to say, as I said, a long speech, I'm sure, but give us your thoughts on that.
I will, and it actually follows on nicely from what Jon said. So in brief, I wrote the book because I've worked in Silicon Valley for many years. Because of that, I've had a lot of jobs. Everybody I know has had a lot of jobs. It's a very fluid job market. Every job market now is fluid, but I think Silicon Valley and the spirit of entrepreneurialism that Jon is talking about has made this ecosystem, if you will, it's a given that people are going to move around. So that's a natural kind of place to cultivate lots of connections. Because I've been around a long time, people were always sending people to me. Either they'd moved to the Bay Area, or they wanted to get into tech or something like that. And so that led to me writing an article about basically nurturing a network for life, because it's not just about the transaction of getting a job and then you're done. You have to continue to cultivate, meet people, keep in touch with people over time. And in fact, we all need this because we move around in terms of jobs, as I mentioned, much more than ever before. Everyone is going to work longer, and we're all a testament to that. And more people are self-employed or independent contractors. All of those are conditions for continuing to build a network. So the article eventually turned into a book proposal, which lucky for me was sold. And for me, the task was, how do I detail a bunch of little daily things that I do, daily habits that I have to keep in touch with people, kind of pop up in front of people again, usually to make an introduction or get an introduction. How do I detail a bunch of small things, none of which takes a lot of time, and all of which are sort of become muscle memory and are not hard to do. And by the way, I am an introvert. I do it at my own speed. I do a lot online, obviously. So for me, it was, can I actually describe all this stuff and why it matters? And so the output there was the book, which came out almost 2 years ago, and then a paperback last year. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort of nexus of it. And if I preach anything, it's that people should ideally be open and curious about the occasions for meeting new people. And I do not mean at networking events in hotel ballrooms, which fortunately no one is going to right now because that's just not the way to do it. Almost all of connecting with people is one-to-one. And so you can concentrate on people you actually like and are curious about, and it doesn't have to be everyone you've ever met. That's the good news.
Excellent, excellent. I had a lot of things that I wanted to address in your comments. You did talk about events. That's a nice segue to Jarrod. So yeah, I'll ask a question that's not on my prepared list, Jarrod. Your whole essence is about events. It's about being there, being present. How do you make if it's not a transition, at least how do you make the adjustment? And what has it meant for you? I mean, personally.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Wendy, thanks for the opportunity to be part of this fantastic panel, and pleasure to meet all of you around the world. I was never meant to be a networker. Like the bio mentioned, I'm a full-time musician. Only in 2011, I decided to go full-time. Since 2001, when I moved to Ottawa, I tried to get a government job, like most people around here. And I was bouncing around contract to contract. Started the band, and it's such a unique band. My mentors at the time said, you need to go to networking events to get gigs. You have to create a market, because nobody's ever heard of an all saxophone band before. Very, very unique. And okay, what did I know from networking events? Not much. It's icky. Everybody hates it. And I used to do everything wrong. And a year later, I created eSax, and I started wearing the hat as a jazz player. You know, it seemed like the right thing to do. And I really owned this brand. And like you said, Karen, I'd love to chat with you later. It's all about relationship building, because what I was doing at the time, like to really get my brand known originally for the music, was to chat with people, and everybody I met was not having a 700-person cocktail reception. They weren't getting married too often. They weren't going to hire us for jazz or classical music. But what I was doing without realizing was building a rapport with people in the eventuality that they would keep us in mind or hear of somebody looking for music of any kind. And that's where I realized the whole concept of networking. And then I started this organization to bring together people, much like Karen was saying, you know, she's the go-to person in San Fran or Silicon Valley. Well, that's what I'm known for here in Ottawa. And I started hosting these events, and actually these banners behind me are from one of my larger events. And it's really snowballed from there. Social media, I believe you mentioned quickly about one of my channels on YouTube. Yeah, we have over 600 videos on entrepreneurship and networking and branding and all this stuff. I could go on and on forever. And it all comes down to how you make other people feel. Listening to them, not trying to sell them, you know, shove your products and services down their throats. No. You have to ask a lot of questions in order to further evaluate how you're going to reply to it, and keeping in mind that you're not there to sell. You're there to listen and try to refer people and just be a connector. And that's what I've become without realizing it at first. And that's why, and the whole branding, whatever you're into, it has to be consistent. I mean, it helps. I used to work in the trademarks office, the Canadian Intellectual Properties Office. So I own 9 trademarks. So that's another thing in entrepreneurship that most people don't take for granted, is the intellectual property. Anyways, it all comes down to consistent messaging on all of your different social media channels and in person. It's that trust factor. I'm sure you've met a lot of people that, you know, you get that fuzzy feeling. You don't know if they're genuine or not. You have to be genuine. People see it.
Right. Fantastic.
I'm just going to jump in here.
Sure.
Jarrod and I have known each other for a number of years now, and he is well known for that fedora, for one thing. But Jarrod, arrow on the socks. Yes, he has socks. You didn't bring the model with you this time, right?
E-socks.
E-socks, yeah. But that, let's just talk about that event where, you know, we both gave an award in Peter Stewart's name. How many people were at that event?
We had about 600 people, and it was featuring Brett Wilson from CBC Dragon's Den, Bruce Linton, who was one of the co-founders of Canopy Growth, on the day that cannabis got legal in Canada. Yes. And they launched another business called Ruckify with Steve Cody, a huge success. And that's what this banner is from, was from that event.
Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to mention that he is well known and he draws a lot of people to his events.
Sure, sure. One of the things, I've always considered myself to be I guess a bit of it. Karen will know there are shades of introverts, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We're all on the spectrum.
Yes, we're on the spectrum. So I consider myself, a bit of I'm less introverted the older I get, actually, but I still consider myself a bit of an introvert. But I don't know if it's a contradiction for someone who's introverted to also enjoy being around people. Because I've always enjoyed being around people, but that doesn't mean I want to go up to them and talk to them, because that to me is really tough to do.
It's really, really it was Carl Jung who kind of developed this theory of I guess personalities along this line, and for him the definition was, where do you draw your energy and how do you sort of re-energize yourself? Introverts tend to want to regroup and kind of process the world, in a quiet space on their own. Then they go back out into the world. Extroverts are more likely to get energy from the group and from, the drinks, dinner, after drink, cocktails after. I mean, sort of, a range of events and meetings with people energize them more. It's not to say they don't also need quiet time, but or that we only want to be at home. It's not the same as shy.
Right.
So it's really just, and there is such a thing, because I did a little reading on this, as a social introvert, which is what I am, and it sounds like what you are.
Yeah. I think I can remember, early days of working, post school. For some reason, and this was certainly it really sounds like, it makes me feel really old, pre-computers. I collected business cards from people. I mean, almost obsessively, and I saved them, and I still do, although they mean less to me now because there are so many other records of the people that you meet, emails and everything else, contact list. But I collected business cards, and these are things I tell people, if they, now that having made a TED presentation, you're all of a sudden, an instant expert, although, I'm no more expert at what I do than I was the day before I gave a TED talk. But for some reason, having that label makes you an expert. But so I get asked questions.
Well, I'm sure you look much more learned after your TED talk. But your question about, the business cards, right? I have tens of thousands of business cards.
Yes.
It begs the question, what is the purpose of a business card? How do you follow up with them? And what system do you use? And I could go on for days about this.
Sure. But I for some reason, I felt like it was important. Something was compelling me to do it. And it turns out that it was important because maybe not so much during my working life, but when I became an entrepreneur, those business cards or whatever they represented, that network that I had collected over that past 40 years, that was really important to me. I mean, I reached out to that people in that network when I began my business, looking for sales opportunities and things of that nature. So despite my introvert nature, I guess I realized how important networking is. And I was really glad that networking wasn't something that felt challenging to me, that I liked being around people. So it felt like I would have been doing that anyway, which I guess is the best way to be networking if you're not kind of forcing yourself into it. I don't know, Karen, how you...
Yeah, it's the difference between being transactional and being authentic. There's a great line which some of you may have seen, and I I dug up, and it's kind of been my mantra since writing the book, from a guy named Ivan Meisner, and it is networking is less like hunting and more like farming. That's how he put it.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfect. And if farming is, a too remote a concept these days, then gardening works also. But basically, it's ongoing cultivation, but it's not 24/7.
Right.
Whereas a hunt is, shall we say, very transactional. And that is what people don't like about it.
Right. Right. Jon, I wanted to add, Jon, some people, I guess some people feel like they can network themselves into finding a mentor too, because having a mentor is such a valuable thing, and that they can use their network, whether they have one or need to create one, but they can use networking to find a mentor. But I always thought mentoring was I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, but there was much more intimacy to having a mentoring relationship, and then just networking to find a mentor wasn't the way that was going to happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So let's me anchor into some of the debate we've just had. So I think it depends what your purpose is. I think in the end we're human beings are tribal animals, and there's a lot of research that says it's really hard to get beyond 150 or 200 people intimately, and build relationships with. It's the old sort of village concept, and I think we still all anchor back to that. But of course, in the modern world, we have tools that allow us to go well beyond 150 people. The modern medium is something like LinkedIn now, and I see lots of people with not only bragging rights in terms of connections and followers and all the rest of it, but they go beyond that, just in terms of how far they can get around the world. But in the end, if you're looking for a mentor, that having 10,000 connections or whatever it might be isn't going to help you build a relationship on a deeper level with someone. So I think you need to at least think about your goals in the process in terms of who it is that you can work with, that you like, they like you, because you're trying to create mutual value. So I think that was the point Jarrod was making. It's not a sell to. You might reach out on LinkedIn thinking this person might be useful to me in a very transactional way. But if you're trying to build a relationship, you want to start the other way around and think, what value do I bring to that person in order for them to feel they want to reciprocate in some way? That's what starts to establish relationships. And incidentally, that's how co-founders often come together in startups.
Right.
Is they actually find they've got mutual skills or mutual experience or mutual values that allow them to come together and solve a very big problem in some cases. So what looks like an accidental relationship actually comes about because they find that level of bonding.
Fantastic. Yeah, that aligns with the way I feel about it. I've always struggled a bit with the mentoring, and I've given it a lot of thought, certainly over these last 8 or 9 years. And I get asked that question too, as a result of my newfound exposure. But I searched my soul, and I can't point to someone who's been my mentor, a single individual. And I've finally become comfortable with the fact that I've had, and maybe, I wonder if this is a phrase that one uses, that I've had probably dozens, if not hundreds, of micro mentors throughout my life. I mean, I've been working for over 40 years. I've met a lot of people in my work and related fields, and I feel like I've taken the best of what I've seen and avoided the worst of what I've seen too. I've had those kinds of, anti-mentors as well, people whose behaviors I don't want to mimic at all.
Of course. Well, what about one or other of your parents? Were they mentors to you?
I'm afraid not.
Okay. All right.
No, I've thought about that as well. I like to find reasons. I like to find things I can give them credit for, but that's not one of them.
Okay.
Actually, you made an interesting point, Paul, about what was the phrase you used? Non-mentors or
Anti-mentors.
Anti-mentors, thinking that sometimes there's mentors you're going to meet, angel investors or whatever, only looking out for themselves. You're just a pawn. And are they mentors, or are they just trying to pad their pockets? It's something you have to sit down and realize, and that's where it comes from, your gut feeling.
Right. Some of them are so obvious you don't even have to search your gut, Jarrod, but the best of them are probably less obvious. So yeah, I agree with you completely. But yeah, I think I've settled on the fact that I've just had dozens and dozens of mentors, and from whom I've taken little pieces, mentors whose names I don't even remember anymore, but they contributed to the body of experience and knowledge that I thought was important. And I'm comfortable with that. I don't think, I hope it's not essential to have a mentor that you can clearly point to, with a name and date of birth and all that kind of stuff. I feel like there might be a lot of people in my shoes who've just had, dozens of mentoring experiences throughout their career that they've absorbed.
Can I just jump in here because we're talking a lot about mentoring,
Yeah.
but Jon and I talked about this, in the book actually. So we've got advising, we've got mentoring, we've got coaching, we've got consultancy. So I'd just like to bring that up a little bit and just say, okay, what is the difference between them, and when are they needed? When is the best time to engage with someone, I guess, in, the different areas?
Maybe let's take a stab at it just in terms of let others weigh in, but very different activities. So, consulting work is often, and a lot of us have perhaps done it in our career, is for commercial end. So you will take on a project, you're going to be paid to do it. It's usually got a beginning and an end. Some of that consulting work, a lot of it is advisory. So you don't necessarily get to stick around to watch the results. And when it comes to an end, that's the end of the gig. So you're not implying it necessarily a long-term relationship, although it can turn into them. Right. I think coaching work is much more personal. Clearly, it's usually one-to-one. It doesn't have to be, but it usually is. And I think in that case, an individual is looking for growth in some way. And again, there's usually a commercial contract in the mix in terms of what's going on. So the person, the coachee, is paying the coach to actually be that individual, helping and supporting them. But at the same time, I think they're trying to mutually explore what that growth path might look like. So there's much more of a personal relationship in the mix than there would be with consulting work. And then mentoring work is different again, because it's very unusual to find a commercial relationship in mentoring. These are usually not paid. So they're often peer, and if they're not peer, they're maybe one step away. So organizationally, these are often people who are slightly senior. We often think of mentoring being in a slightly more junior person to a senior person, and then they're sharing their received wisdom, in one way, shape, or form. And like coaching, trying to identify what might be not only a growth path, but what gets in the way of growth in terms of obstacles, and how they might jump over those obstacles or go around them in some way. Mm-hmm. So they're very different activities, and they suit very different temperaments. As well. A consultant very often, just to go back to Karen's point, is often extroverted. Certainly the managing partners of consulting firms go in there with their own vision of what they want to do and might take charge. A coach is more likely to be introverted, and then a mentor somewhere between the two. So there are differences in terms of who's effective in doing those three roles.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I want to add sort of a role that I have used. Like Paul, I can't point to a lot of mentors in the capital M sense. I can point to people throughout my career who have been door openers, right, and gave me an opportunity, and I walked through. They didn't necessarily then stick around to be mentors, or they weren't really equipped to be mentors. So I've found sort of a different approach for me, which is I have a brain trust, or maybe a number of brain trusts. In other words, people who are not, they are mentoring me in some way, or they're people I trust to get advice on certain things. And I can run things by them that are maybe either ethical questions or, life, path questions. Is this the right time to do this? What do you think about this idea? So I'm a big believer in that, maybe possibly a fourth approach where it's not, it can be one-to-one, and there's just a core group of people I think all of us have who we will turn to say, I need your advice, or I don't have anyone else to talk to about this thing. And it can be personal as well as professional. But anyway, I like to think of them, and it may be more than one group, and they may not all know each other, by the way, as my brain trust.
Right. I totally agree.
Can I just add one other, maybe to socialize a new term, a fourth category, which is I think what you're alluding to, which is a facilitator. So I think if you take the mentor word away, there's a lot of facilitators of connection, of door opening that come about. And to pay Karen a compliment, I was launching a book a year ago and I wanted to get into the podcast world. Karen is superb as a facilitator in terms of giving good advice, some steering, some introductions to people that were extremely useful to me as part of the process. And I'd like to hope that that could work in reverse, where Karen might say, well, I'm trying to do something, Jon. What would you suggest? And it's not a mentoring in any way, shape or form, but it's certainly facilitation orientated.
Yeah, good point.
Excellent. Excellent. Were you going to say something, Wendy? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, I just, while we've just got kind of this going, Jon, I want you to also just talk a little bit about your silver moonshots and what it's all about, please.
Sure. So yeah, I guess it pulls together a lot of threads of what we're talking about. So a couple of years ago, because and I should context this, so I believe there's not enough ideation and innovation, let alone entrepreneurship in the older adult space. So for me, that's the 50 plus space that I know Wendy's interested in most. We have a legion of unmet needs in that space, and they're not all on the healthcare side, they're elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So we need more people engaging in entrepreneurship to solve some of those problems. And it's younger people doing it on behalf of older people, but it's older people themselves solving for their peer group. So to address that, I formed a nonprofit. It's called Silver Moonshots. And what we do is bring companies together every quarter as a cohort. So it's usually 6 companies. And for a period of 6 weeks, we give them a very fast sprint in terms of how they may take their startup idea and get it all grown up, for want of a better term, to evolve it, to make sure it's on the right path with enough entrepreneurial chops to be investable ultimately, whether it's their own money being put into it so it's not wasted, or they're seeking third-party capital. We've had 5 cohorts so far go through that, and I assign mentors to every team. So we're very much into not only a curriculum to follow, but taking the advice of people who've been in the space and know what they're talking about in terms of the end consumer and their particular needs, which is not generic. It's specific to a tribe of people that need what they're doing. So that's how that works. It's really interesting because I would say the biggest takeaway in my experience has been the peer mentoring that goes on. If you're focused on older adult issues, even if someone else has got a very different startup, the cross-fertilization ideas is remarkable. And it's a joy to see, because I think everyone gets the benefit of a rising tide that floats all boats. Quote John F. Kennedy when he was talking about tax policy, actually, but it's become a wider.
Is that true, really?
Yeah, sadly, an appropriated term that we use differently today.
Yeah. Excellent. Despite being a social introvert, as Karen said, I did enjoy the opportunity to attend events and meet other people and hear other points of view. And I mean, I think maybe they're frightening for introverts, but they're also amazing for introverts, because you can just stand still and still, let all the activity flow around you and hear and see and touch something that's interesting to you. So I, for one, really lament the idea that we can't assemble like that for quite some time. And I wonder if the way we're assembling today will continue to develop and grow and achieve the same kind of results as an in-person. I mean, nothing will ever take the place of truly in-person networking. But I have the feeling that, like in all things, we're just going to get much, much better at this virtual virtual events, and perhaps have, pretty good takeaways as well from these, the way we did from our in-person. I used to tell my kids, when they were old enough that this was an issue for them about attending events and things, I would sort of almost compel myself to attend events. There are many events that on the surface you think like, this doesn't feel like it's like right on with what I'm doing. This doesn't feel like a, bingo for me. I wonder if I'll get anything out of this. I don't think I've ever attended an event that I didn't get something out of. Just something. I mean, it might not have been a home run, but there was something valuable to take away and made it worthwhile. I can recall many, many instances where I've said that to myself or to someone else. Oh, I'm so glad I went. I'm so glad because I met this guy from da-da-da-da-da-da or something like that. And so, I don't know how, I haven't read your book, Karen, but I don't know if there's a way where people can be encouraged to do that, because you can almost not fail if you show up, or
it's funny you say that. I do exhort people to default to yes when it comes to someone saying, you know what, I want to introduce you to my friend so-and-so because you have a lot in common, or I think you'd enjoy each other. Default to yes on that. Kind of be open to meeting someone new because
sure,
someone who knows you says that. It's funny though that you talk about events, because I agree with you, and I often will go to not a networking event, but
right.
An industry panel or a conference or a workshop or something. And I absolutely will get something out of it. But I now know there are also times I will talk myself out of going because, for example, on a Friday afternoon or evening, I'm not going. I know myself. I might say I'm gonna go, and then I'm not gonna go just because
sure.
It's, And so I do also. It's a fine line between put yourself out there to some degree, but also pay attention to what is too much or what you could do briefly or online. For example, Jarrod, if you're at a workshop or a conference, you don't have to meet everyone there. If you come away with 2 or 3 contacts to follow up with, you're not going to do all your connecting at the event anyway. So it's more like 5 minutes of some small talk and a little bit of context and connectivity. Get the contact information in whatever format and follow up later.
Actually,
Right.
Karen, that's a great point. For the first year, probably I was out networking. I felt the need to connect with everyone in the room.
Yeah.
You talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and I'd feel anxious, and I'd have to leave and go talk to someone else until I had everybody's business card. And it took me a while to realize, I probably read your book earlier, it takes me some time to realize that the purpose is to, if you want to spend 15, 20 minutes, half an hour talking to somebody, really getting to know them, then it's a successful event. As long as you walk away with at least one measurable goal. It could be to take two people out for coffee or connect with 5 people on LinkedIn. But what's the purpose for going? Like for me, I get energy from going to events. I mean, this is what I do. And it's funny, somebody was talking earlier about, the farming analogy or the hunting. I'm an archaeologist by education. I have a graduate degree in archaeology, and I love trying to correlate the two. And that's exactly, I think, how people should be approaching networking events. And Paul, you were talking earlier about virtual networking. Will it ever be the same as face-to-face? Well, this is pretty close face-to-face.
Right.
I agree. Nothing will ever beat the face, because we're seeing the whole body language. And what is
Right.
90% of all communication is nonverbal. And I was chatting with Wendy earlier. I'm using a new platform, non-Zoom, for networking events and conferences. And I'd be happy to talk to you later about it. But this is the new normal now. This is what people are getting used to. If you're looking on your phone, taking care, you're not giving 100% attention. It's hard to stare into that tiny little camera, but
Right.
that's what people see.
Exactly. But, just to carry that further, I mean, I've come to know, well, I didn't know you at all before today, but I've come to know you through this event, and Wendy and Jon and Karen. But there are there are 50 other people out there, and they're just little faces in the Hollywood squares, sort of, right? But it would be marvelous if we could, okay, I'm not going to get to know them as well as I'm getting to know Karen, and Karen and I have mutual friends and all, but maybe I could learn a little bit more about them, even if it's just where they live and what they do, and maybe I'll remember that hey, there's somebody in Quebec who's a mechanical engineer that I'd love to talk to about this. So maybe these virtual events will become a little more intimate, other than just the speakers, the panelists, et cetera. Maybe the attendees will get to be a little more present, the way they would be if this was an in-person event. If this was an in-person event, there'd be some lady in the front row raising her hand saying, "Oh, I have a question for Jarrod," or something, and you'd get to know a little bit about her. She'd introduce herself or something. So I don't know.
Well, let me just say also, I mean, we're all on a lot of video calls now all the time, I imagine. They're not all with 50 people.
Right.
And so there's some part of ongoing cultivating of your garden is simply a catch-up call, ideally with video, to have a talk with somebody that you haven't seen in a while. And I know I'm doing more of that, because I can't go out and meet someone for coffee as easily as I would like to.
Right.
So, and there's also then small groups. I'm sure we've all either been part of or heard about, dinner parties. I recently had a birthday, and it was a Zoom birthday dinner. And, some of my favorite people were on, and we had drinks and we traded stories. It was great. So anyway, there's all sizes and shapes of online events, just as there are in real life events.
Correct. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So, Paul, I have an idea just to socialize. Should we be using modern AI, for example, to enrich an experience like this one? We've got 20 people sitting here. Some know each other, some don't. But we could scrape public information. I know there are privacy issues, but put that to one side. That say, look, I'm looking at, Caprice, for example, and I could say, well, what's in common on Caprice's LinkedIn profile and mine?
Right.
Goal alignment. Did we go to the same school? Do we both have an interest in the longevity economy, or whatever it might be? Maybe they could scroll around the pictures that we're looking at.
Fabulous.
So draws us in more to thinking, well, that person could be really interesting, and we're prompted to have a conversation.
Right. That's fabulous. That absolutely.
It is fabulous, but this whole thing of, I would love to be able to say to everyone here, I'm going to give you the email address of everybody that's on this call, just to see if you could connect with each other. But I can't.
Right.
The privacy people would come after me.
But there's nothing stopping all of you from taking our names down and connecting on LinkedIn.
That's
I've already
correct.
sent a few people here an invite.
Yeah, it doesn't have to happen through Zoom.
I don't know what's going on.
Actually, the new platform I'm using, you can easily connect on social media that way. Click of a button. Super
You
easy.
really are into this new platform.
Oh,
aren't
I
you?
think it's the next future. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
What's
the
it
way to go.
called? What's it called?
It's called Remo, REMO. And I have more information at my website, esax.ca. I'm giving demos. Actually, I'm giving a demo tomorrow at noon Eastern Standard Time. And it will change how you host networking events in particular, but also conferences, one-on-one meetings. I host all my meetings on there. It is brilliant. May I share the link, Wendy?
Yes, go by all means. Sure. As long as the Zoom police aren't on here.
They're busy doing security things.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Jarrod should be like the poster boy for making the transition from in-person to virtual.
Well, and I think, one of the things that I was just thinking about whenever Jarrod was, and we were talking about this virtual networking more, that the one thing that with virtual, so, there's times that and I find this whenever I've been in-person networking events, that people, they hear that I'm talking, about older entrepreneurship. Oh, and then it's flat. And they're kind of just wanting to get away from me because they don't want to hear anything about me. Whereas virtually, it'll be a totally different thing. They can just turn off my camera or whatever, so I think it's easier in some ways. It's not as intrusive, shall I say.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
very.
Yeah. So, all right. I'm going to, if everybody's okay, there's some questions in here in the box. And so I'm just going to just see what's here and we can answer some of these if that's all right. Or Paul, am I taking over from you here?
No, that's quite
Okay.
all right. That's quite all right. I was worried about Caprice taking over for all of us.
This is from Claudio to everyone. What's a good plan for networking to make the best use of time and energy?
Well, I'm happy to go first on that, Wendy.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think you do a little bit of outreach every day. So for me, I'd like to post on LinkedIn. I put a post up that really declares what I'm interested in. So it's what I'm curious about. And I use that as a way of creating inbound conversation. So that little bit of outreach, which takes me all of, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in the morning, actually will engender something going on. And in the comment thread, much as we have a comment thread here in Zoom, it will catalyze a conversation either with someone I already know and gets the relationship a little deeper, or to an entirely new set of people. I did a thread recently on population health, which I'm interested in, and getting better data, especially in a COVID environment. And I'm now in a think tank conversation that I started with 8 people and loving it. And they were all strangers to me, bar one. And I've been in that think tank for 3 months now. So I think it's a little bit every day. And I think you can use online tools like this to catalyze it in the absence of being able to do it face to face.
That's great. That's just great.
I'll follow on that because I see another question from Emma that relates to a daily habit. You talk about adopting daily habits to develop your network. So similar to Jon, but a little different. I certainly use online tools. And for me, I don't have a good CRM software solution for my network. It's kind of all in my head. But I'm always reading Twitter. I'm always reading the news, and people will pop into my mind based on something I've seen. It could be something funny, does not have to be hard news. And so my kind of warm up in the morning is simply to reach out to 3 or 4 people who've come to mind based on the late night show, commentary for the night before that was so funny, or, a sports team, if I know they're following one, or something, in the sort of like tech world of news. And I just will reach out. Typically for me, it's Twitter DMs, but I will also send email if I'm just thinking about someone. You've been on my mind. I want to find out how you are. Let's make a date. That doesn't require an immediate meeting. These sort of sending things, thought of this, saw this and thought of you. How are you? Let's catch up soon. Again, no obligation there, but it's sort of my morning kind of warm up where I'm just reaching out to a few people that I know. Similarly, if someone has asked me for, do you know a kind of person who does so-and-so, or I need an introduction, I'll think about that and write to the person I think would be right, wait for their okay before I introduce them. But in any case, these are all small, either email or private messages on some platform or another. And, it's 5, 10, 15 minutes of the morning. Can happen other times of the day, but that tends to be how my brain gets going.
There's another question here. It's for Karen and Jarrod again, or Karen and Jarrod, and John, if you have anything, you just jump in too. What advice do you have for people who are not great with off-the-cuff communication and often need to reflect?
Well, I often need to reflect, but if I'm out and about and in the moment, it's not so much, all conversation is helped by having a context, right? So if the context is, and these are all sort of pre-COVID examples, but you'll know what I mean. You're meeting someone who's coming in for a job interview, or you're standing in line, to get into a concert or an author talk at a bookstore. I do need some COVID examples, but in any case, you have a context already, like, why are you here? What brought you here to this thing? What interests you about this? That's not random small talk. That is a little bit more of like, let's narrow this down for the two of us in this moment. It doesn't have to last more than 3 or 4 minutes, but it can then spark. So, oh, you're interested in that. Oh, I once did that. Oh, I know someone who knows something about that. That's how these moments of small talk can kind of have their own shape and momentum that can lead to then further conversation. And for me, it's just, I'm not going to do that 50 times in a row. I might do it, 5 times in a row, and then, take a break, go get a coffee, and then, come back for more. But in any case, it's an easy thing to remember. You're not just talking randomly with a stranger about anything under the sun. You already want to start framing a context. Most people do.
Hold the coffee, Karen. I'd rather go for a glass or bottle of wine. But if you're more shy or introverted and you find it a little hard, oh, I got to go to this networking event. It's Friday afternoon. I don't feel like going. If you have a business or you're thinking of going in business, usually it doesn't happen by itself. It takes momentum. It takes more people to hear about you in some way. And I have a whole bunch of number 1 tips, but the one I'm going to say now is ask questions. A lot of the times, this probably happened to you. You're at an event and the person comes up, blah, 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 blah. I'm so great. You got to hire me because blah, blah, and they try to sell you. Those people, I just politely find a way to leave the conversation. But, how did you hear about the event? Do you know the organizer? Have you been on one of Wendy's calls before? What did you think about this? How was traffic or a virtual event? What's the weather like? All these fluff questions to hone in on how you might be able to help them.
And provide context, just what I'm saying, yeah.
Absolutely. And I know somebody from the call was on Valleyfield. Well, I grew up in Montreal, probably not that far. Anything you can to engage the other person. And again, I have tons of stuff like this. I'm sure you do as well, Karen. But it's to relate to the other person. That's what relationship building is. Not trying to shove your product or service down their throat or to use you as a stepping stone to get to maybe somebody like John, for funding or for whatever it is. That's the whole concept of it being genuine.
So let me ask you this, Jarrod, or Karen, or John. So you're in a conversation with someone that is just being like you are. How do you just leave that conversation without insulting the person?
Oh, Karen, please go ahead, and I'll talk in a second.
My time-honored way. First of all, it's not an insult to leave a conversation. We've all done it at cocktail parties, for example. I'm going to refill my drink now. Nice talking to you. there's the time honored at a conference. Oh, look at the time. I'm sorry, I have to go take a call. I mean, we do this every day in every instance. I have something else coming up, but I'd like to stay in touch with you. I'd like to get back to you later. Or you don't have to say that. You can just say it's been nice talking to you if that's really the end of the road. But it's not an insult. People have other things to do. All of us do. And so we all have to bow out of that moment and move along. It's okay.
Karen, you missed my favorite. We got to quote Woody Allen here. Excuse me, I have an appointment back on planet Earth.
One of my favorite things to do is you see, hey, Sarah, come over here. I'd like to introduce you to John. Or sorry, John, it was just the first name that came to my head. And then they introduce themselves and you feel like they treat you like a pro because they don't know each other. And then you could slowly back away. That's one way. Another thing is if there's nobody else within reaching distance, a good tip that I'd like to say is, I know that, there's probably more people here you'd like to meet, but it was a pleasure connecting with you and I'll follow up with you on LinkedIn. Here's a great little trick. Take the business card from the person, little fedora. If you could write on it, always carry a pen with you. Pleasure meeting you, nice handshake. And then turn around and write something on their business card about your conversation, what you had in common. If they had a dog, if they're planning a trip to Hawaii next month. And then when you send your follow-up email or LinkedIn connection, refer to it.
There you go.
And put it in your database. I just use Excel, nothing fancy, but I can tell you the date and where I met every single person and when I followed up with them. There's a lot of FUs in my database, but it's a lot of very detailed.
It's called stalking.
Creeping, I think is the better word.
Oh, creeping. Okay. All right. Question for John. You talked about mentors are typically peers. What are your thoughts on the benefits or pitfalls of reverse mentoring or intergenerational partnerships, particularly with seniors starting a business?
Yeah. So yes, mentors are typically peers in some way, shape or form, but that's been changing in recent times, and particularly as we now have 4 generations in the workplace. So we see lots of intergenerational mentoring going on, and it's healthy in both directions, and I like it a lot. Funnily enough, in the Silver Moonshots Accelerator, I will assign mentors to a team, but I find that individuals will migrate to other people more based on their passion and their values than on their age, for example. So I like it a lot. And to anchor back to the beginning of this conversation, to our mutual friend, Chip Conley, for Karen and I, of course, he has really gone deeply into this whole realm and invented this term, the mentern, as a way of thinking about the mentoring that goes in both directions, where an individual has got the capacity to mentor someone. Maybe it's because they've got a little bit more experience in the space or they're older, but equally there's a role for that individual to be mentored in the reverse direction by someone who might have, for example, technology skills, even though they're a lot younger. So I think it's a very healthy thing. We should do more of it. We should seek it out. I think one of the things we can do is we can get very tribal about our knowledge and about our peer set. And I think we miss things going on in the world. So, today we might say LinkedIn is the platform, but, we know up and coming platforms, TikTok or whatever, are incredibly popular, and we need to know what's going on in those environments as well. So mentor widely.
I think that the virtual networking, whatever platform you're using, is a great opportunity to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, in any one event, you're probably not talking to 10, 15, 30 people at once, right? You're talking to 3, 2, 1 person. Practice what you would plan on doing in person, one-on-one with somebody. And let's say you really connected. Let's say, Robert, let's say I connected with you today. Great, let's set up a meeting next week or, in 3 days from now at this time, and I have another Zoom call with you one-on-one. What would you do different virtually that you would do in person? And this is a great way to practice.
It is.
I think Jarrod's made me feel, less, I don't know what lonely is not the word I was searching for, but I've really been lamenting the COVID seclusion, not to the point where I've been going out and doing harmful things to myself or to others. You know, I've stayed pretty well secluded and stuck to the program, and you know, expect everyone of sound mind to do similarly. But it's been tough. My life was more filled with in-person events before that, and meetings and events and things. And I have been lamenting the absence of those. And so I think, Jarrod, you've given me more of a kind of an encouragement or an incentive to make more out of this new normal, as they say, because it ain't going away, and it's better to embrace it and not just keep sitting around impatiently waiting for things to go back to the way they used to be.
Talking about the normal, Paul, and I guess if we're wrapping up with some closing comments, the networking is always going to be there, either virtual, in person, or on your phone, whatever it is. But I challenge you, in 2 years from now, when you look back at your time in COVID, how would you describe it? What did you do? Did you build your business behind the scenes, work on your processes? Did you go for walks? Did you connect with another 500 people on LinkedIn? What tangible rationale can you justify from doing? Were you sitting watching Netflix and gaining 30 pounds? Well, a month ago, I started walking. I never had time for walking. I never thought I needed to take the time. I have to build my businesses. I'm averaging 18,000 steps a day. Wow. And now I'm really working on this. Well, you can't see, but I'm pointing to my gut. And it's given me more energy. And everybody talks about work-life balance. Find it and own it. Like, Paul, if you want to start up another business, there's never been a better time to do it.
Yeah, that's what people say. Absolutely.
I would also add, you can have a variety of virtual meetups, as we were talking about before. So there's one group of my former 3 women who I worked with at different times at Google. We're all friends. We all, since we've gone on to different things now, we typically have met for brunch probably every couple of months. So now we have created a private WhatsApp channel just for, sort of random stuff that we see flying by and we want to talk about. And then we schedule sort of a virtual brunch every now and again. And we're maintaining as well as, we could in person. It'll be nice to do it again sometime in person, but in the meantime, the bond is there and we're nurturing it.
Right. That's excellent.
And just a final quick word for me, since I guess we're wrapping up. I think the other thing to think about is just reach back out to old friends. Networking is not all about the new. It's about going back to individuals that you've enjoyed in the past and reconnecting. And I think that's one of the great traps we've got. We've got volume available to us now, but it doesn't mean that we should not go back to people that have been, a rich part of our lives in the past. So make a little bit of time for that to happen.
And this is a perfect time to be doing that because everybody is comparing notes about how they're getting by and what they're doing.
Yes. Yeah. Well said.
I think that, we all seem to be here. We all have to at some point embrace change. Some people don't like it, but I think that is the new norm, that we have to just kind of go with the flow. Like we have no control over this, none whatsoever. And it's basically just staying in touch, as everybody's saying, it's staying in touch and it's building those relationships. And it's just really important that we do it. So, yeah.
And a growth mindset, Wendy, I would say.
Pardon me?
Adopt a growth mindset, as Carol
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Growth. Yeah. So anyways, yeah. This has been a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Jump off.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone. Yes, there will be a replay. Okay. It'll be on my website. So I will let everybody know.
Excellent.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks,
Pleasure.
Paul.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone.